We are live. Hi, Chris. Welcome to Venture with Grace.
Hey, Grace, great to meet you and great to have me. Thanks.
To start the show, I would love for the audience to get to know you a little bit more. So you started your career as a client service manager, and now you have worked on many iconic companies such as Box, Adobe, and now you're the CMO of Twilio. Why don't we start with what were some core career lessons that you've learned early on in your career, kind of shape you into who you are today?
Yeah, I mean, I think I've been lucky, to span some incredible companies and brands. And I think you mentioned my first role right out of college, university, was focused on, I think, it was more around the client engagement, right? It was a
Mhm,
client services manager, and it was for a company called Claritas. And at that time, data was not as readily available around, for marketers. And
mhm,
we were doing a lot of geosegmentation. We had software around this geosegmentation that was based on census data. So it seems so antiquated many, many, many years ago. But this idea of how does a marketer figure out what markets to enter, what's the population look like, what demographic information, all of that. And I think it sort of guided me in a way that I think a lot about how do I drive client experience with a marketing lens on that. And I think
mhm,
throughout my career, and I've held many different roles, whether that's as marketer and being a practitioner or being on the client side, on the software side, helping marketers really understand, how to leverage, software and capabilities. I think has sort of shaped how I think through that. And so, yeah, it's been fantastic. I've been incredibly lucky to work for some incredible companies and given opportunities that I'm very blessed.
For sure. I think like one of the other like podcasters also asked you about like, being from like a VP of customer success at Box to like the CMO. You mentioned like there's a lot of like resonating points from like, serving customers, understanding their like cycle and like basically understanding the product, understanding the problem a lot better. So I guess like what were something that you feel like people may not see as like the exact connecting point from customer service to marketing and that you can leverage as your superpower?
Yeah, I mean, I think too often, and again, I'm generalizing here, but marketers don't always
Mhm,
think about the entirety of the customer experience and the entire
mhm,
customer life cycle. I think that's changing quite a bit now over the last 5 or 10 years. But I think depending on what type of marketer you were, type of CMO, you might be like, oh, I'm responsible for the brand, or I'm responsible for driving revenue, or pipeline if I'm in a B2B world. And I think what has really shaped me in playing multiple different roles is really thinking about being in that customer's shoes. What's the problem we're trying to solve? And I even today I spend a lot of time with customers because I think
mhm,
the reality as a marketer, me sitting down, asking questions, what problems are we solving? How can we get better? What are the things you're thinking about in the future? Just makes me a much better marketer because it provides that context of like why we do this and the
mhm,
business problems that we're trying to solve and the uniqueness of all of the use cases that we can solve. And so I think, I've been talking about this for many years. As marketers, I think we need to spend more time with customers and have that
mhm,
appreciation, but also think about where do we play in the entire life cycle, not just from like, hey, I need to go acquire and work through that, but like the full experience. Marketers are equipped to really help and shape that. And I think that's definitely been changing over the last few years.
for sure. Speaking of like, I guess like career growth, since like I feel like you have been through many different companies and careers, like I guess like who do you identify as your personal board of advisors when it comes to career development?
Yeah, I mean, I think my wife was obviously one that helped shape a lot of my thinking. But I've been lucky enough, through the career to have like different people along the way that have one given me like very very succinct feedback of things that I need to work on, and we all need to work on things, something as part of
Mhm,
that. And I remember, very early, in my career, I have a bit of a casual approach to things. And I remember her specifically saying, hey, like you're in some of these meetings when you get in front of the exec team, like you got to be a little less casual, like be a little, the way that you hold yourself and body language. I still work on that today. I just like not something that naturally, comes comes clear to me. Or I've had other mentors along the way that I think the best ones are not the ones that just sort of affirm and tell you, hey, this is where you should go, but like give you the real feedback that you don't want to hear, but
Mhm.
in your heart, you kind of know it's true, right? And those are the best that are like, listen, here's what you're not so great at. You are not as focused on X, Y, and Z, or you gravitate towards this thing, but as you grow in your career, like you actually have to get better at Y.
Mhm.
And, I think it's sort of shaped my philosophy where all of us have strengths and weaknesses. I think
Mhm.
there's examples where, yes, to some degree, you want to shore up your weaknesses, but you kind of want to focus on your strengths. And the
Mhm.
weaknesses, you can do that by learning or digging in or getting better at it, or pairing yourself with like really good people that are good what you're not good at. And so that was one of the career advices that that I've taken with me. I think
Mhm.
some other things is there's been a lot of mentors in my life that have given me opportunities that probably I wasn't qualified for, but they knew that I had built a reputation of someone that just like, hey, if I say I'm going to do something, I'm going to get it done. That
Mhm.
I'm going to ask lots of questions. I'm going to dig in. I'm going to have like a learner mindset. I'm going to just figure stuff out. And I
Mhm.
think there's been lots of examples, throughout my career where, I've been lucky that I've built this reputation, I've been given opportunities, and then you just got to dig in and execute on that. And I think that's a lot of how I address it.
Mhm.
It's not natural for me to go and just ask for feedback from lots of different people, right? There's a handful of people that I really trust that I know will give me not the information that I want to hear, but the stuff that I don't want to hear, but I know that they're right. So I think that's one of my big guiding principles.
For sure. I wonder, so like, what is one skill that you're constantly trying to get better at? It could be like, technical skill like coding or soft skill like sales. What are something that you feel like you're constantly spending time to improve on?
I mean, there's so many things that I'm working like trying to get better at. Like I could give you a list. We could spend another hour talking through that. I think there's in a couple, maybe a couple of different arenas. One, communication. It's
Mhm.
just not my strong suit with my team, and I have a tendency to put my head down and go execute, and I don't
Mhm.
always like tell everyone whether it's cross functionally or my team like here's what we've got to go do as part of that. So, I'm working very closely with my team, helping me with that, where it doesn't become natural for me. I just do, and I don't necessarily tell why or what we're doing. So I think that's like one practical skill. Just communications is something I'm constantly working through. I think the art and the craft of marketing as a whole, it continues to change. And
Mhm.
keeping up to speed with what are the latest trends and innovations and all that, like that's a full-time job. And I do a lot of that with just lots of reading and podcasts and like learning from my peers. I do a lot of CMO to CMO conversations, like trying to get a sense of like, what are you seeing? What are you working on? I think there's that. And then like I'd be remiss, we haven't even talked about AI yet. We're,
Mhm.
a few minutes in, but like trying to keep up with AI as a whole, every week there's some new innovation that's happening.
Mhm.
And, I spend a lot of time just trying to figure out, okay, what is implications does this have for me personally? For my
Mhm.
family, for the craft, for the business, for tech in general, for society as part of that. So I'm finding myself spending more and more time just consuming, what does the
Mhm.
future look like? Because I think this is, I've been through a few of the big trends, over my time, cloud and mobile and, all of that. But I think this is, yeah, I think there's obviously some hype associated with it, but I do think it is pretty transformational. And I think the world's going to look very different, in 3 to 5 years from now than it does today. So I think that's probably the thing that I'm learning the most is like, how do I keep up with the rapid pace of innovation that's
Mhm.
happening? It's so hard.
Mm. It is super hard. I wonder, so like since you mentioned about like keeping up with the AI stuff, so I guess like one part is like what does your information diet kind of look like for yourself? Like do you just like read the news or like you mentioned about like chatting with other CMOs, like what do you guys talk about? Do you just be like panic together and like I don't know, eat ice cream or something or like how do you guys kind of make it
There's a
better?
little bit of that. Yeah, there's a little bit of that. Like, hey, we need a therapy session around
Mhm.
around some of this. But I think the general sense I get is that everyone feels like they're behind because I
Mhm,
think it's happening so much. Like everyone's like, we're doing stuff, but I'm not keeping up. I don't think I'm doing enough.
mhm,
So I think that's the general sense that everyone I talk to
mhm,
feels. Um, and I think the way that I'm trying to is literally through multiple avenues, right?
mhm.
Whether that is, hey, I'm signed up for a bunch of AI newsletters, like what's happening as part of that. I use ChatGPT constantly, and I'm like, tell me the newest innovation that's happened this week and summarize that for me as part of it.
Mhm,
I listen to YouTube and podcasts, and having just getting a general sense across, not just from a marketing perspective, but just like from a tech perspective of the implications around that.
mhm,
We talk as a team all the time, and I learn from people on my team. That I spent an hour plus last night talking through what type of AI agents should we be building to solve specific use cases around marketing. What are the implications of that? What tech do we have to think through? How do you think through data and privacy and the components of that? And I'm learning, right, as my team is like working through and they're figuring stuff out. So I think and again, it goes back into this notion of, a learner's mindset. There is so much that I don't know that I'm just like trying to be a sponge of, have it all come in. And then, I've got to synthesize all of that. So I'm doing that myself. And then when I go sit down, right, with other CMOs, it's more practical. The question is, okay, what are you doing? Like, how are you leveraging this? What tools are you using? What processes did you start with? Like, is it demand gen and how are you working through that? Is it brand and how are you thinking through creative? Is it content? Are you repurposing? Which tools are you working through? All of those things. So I think there isn't a single source, right, where it's just like, hey, there's a new article that came up. It is like just so much information all coming in
mhm,
that I'm just trying to absorb. And every day
mhm,
I'm trying to learn something new, right? I have 5 minutes.
mhm.
Hey, let me go learn something new that's happening as part of that.
I wonder, what does a typical day look like for you as a CMO of Twilio?
Yeah, I don't think there is a typical day, right? I think the thing the thing that was like most surprising as I got more senior in my career was a notion of like context switching.
Mhm,
And because especially in the craft, and the way that I often think about this is being in a C-suite, you really have two teams, right? You've got the C-suite team where you're working with your peers cross-functionally. How are we thinking through the business? And you're having conversations around growth of the business and strategy and
mhm,
all over like, oh, what are we doing around employees and office locations and like all of that stuff. Like there's like the full, hey, we're running the company and we're talking through at a strategic level, at a company level. And then you're managing your own team where you're like, you are a functional leader and you're like, okay, I've got to work through, how am I becoming, how's my team contributing to the business as part of that? And so there's like two teams you've got to manage as part of that. So some of, and again, my first year here, I probably spent more time with the executive team thinking through as we were going through a transformation as a company. We're trying to figure out what's our long-term strategy, what changes do we make, what's the product look like, how's the brand, all of those things. And then so my allocation of time was probably more at the executive level than the full marketing level. And so you balance that over time, right? Of like where I gravitate as part of that. Right now, I'm spending probably more time thinking through, okay, we're first half of the year, we just finished the second quarter. What's working, what's not working, what are we going to do differently in the second half? How do we work through that? So my
mhm,
day is a lot of context switching. In one case, we might be talking about a new marketing campaign that we're going to go do. How are we measuring success around that? The next is, how are we thinking through brand and, do you like this new design and those aspects? Two, hey, we've got a PR, a new article we want to write. Can you give us feedback? Hey, we've got an earnings script that we're going to start working through. And so it's like a lot of context switching. And then also, I think I do love to spend time with customers. So I do customer meetings. I do a lot of our events where I love to sit down and, like I said before, spend time with customers, get their feedback. So I don't think there's like a generally normal day. It is every day is sort of different, but there's a lot of context switching because I think what is probably I would say in marketing, probably the most comprehensive. If you're a full stack CMO that runs, from communications to pricing to enablement to campaigns, everything else, like that's a pretty broad role. And so in your day to day, you're like, every meeting might be completely different in the context of what you're working through changes,
Mhm.
which I like, because then I get such a variety, but it is hard to like be talking about a campaign 1 minute, right? And then the next minute you're talking about a pricing strategy, that we've got to go to pricing council, for the next week. So it does change quite a bit.
For sure. I wonder, since you mentioned about like there's a lot of context switching, and I think one thing I from like your past interviews that I've heard that is like you really try to tie marketing results to like the business career, like business results. And I wonder when it comes to like thinking about the business results, how do you like quantify the marketing numbers towards that?
Yeah, I've got a big strategy within the team in the last year. Was I really want marketing to be a growth driver for the business, and I think
Mhm.
all marketers, and in B2C that's easier. In B2B sometimes it's not as simple. And I think there's a lot of, and maybe it's because of my background, because I've been in different roles where I've been in a customer success role, I've been in sales organizations, I've been in product. Like I've got a very more of a generalist background. So I think about the role that I play more from a general manager perspective than a full CMO. And everything that I think through is business results around, are we driving the business forward? Are we driving growth? Are we making the company more profitable? As a leader, as we work through that. But I think one of the mistakes too many I think marketers as a whole, if you spent your entire career through marketing, we get very enamored by our own metrics. And I continue to remind the team where it's like, that doesn't matter. Ultimately, is it driving revenue for the business? Is it retaining our customers? That's ultimately what the C-suite wants to think through. And we've got to go run the business. It doesn't matter some vanity metric that marketing's like, hey, we drove, this much click through. And you're like, great. Did that actually result in a conversion that resulted into revenue that's helping us grow as part of that? So a lot of the guiding principle, like I'm spending the entire day tomorrow doing a marketing QBR where we're walking through every part of the organization, measuring like what worked, what didn't work, what are we going to do differently in the second half, and quantifying that ultimately with the guiding principle, right? Are we a growth driver for the business? Are we helping retain customers? Are we moving the brand forward? What role do we play? So that can get into like, yeah, there's all sorts of metrics that we think through in our dashboards and all of that. But at the end of the day, it's are we more profitable, and are we driving growth? That's the guiding principle I think through. And I would encourage more marketers to talk like that, and less about our metrics are our metrics at the C-suite. The metrics are a shared team, and it's revenue and
Mhm.
growth, like, and
Mm.
profitability.
What is your way to track if this thing is like this thing is like 100% tied to a certain revenue growth?
Yeah, I mean, I think it depends on the tactic that we've got, right? Where we often talk about internally, and we're still evolving, right? I think everyone's continuing to evolve, and we could go have a fun
Mhm.
conversation around attribution, and is this ultimately the reason why someone did it, or is it supporting? And we look at it in multiple ways, but we
Mhm.
often talk about ROI, right? So if one of the things that we're continuing to work through is, if you give me $1 and I spend $1 on this marketing campaign, marketing asset, marketing event, whatever that is, what do we get out on the back end? And
Mhm.
ours is a unique, because we're mostly consumption business, where that's a big learning curve for me, because before it was like I spent $1, they bought software, and it's like pretty easy to go work through that. Now we have a different moment, different time period where it's like, well, they bought it, but did they consume it? And so it's a little bit different as I'm adjusting as a leader in the business. But we talk about payback period, long lifetime value. We're still working through a lot of that, and I've got an incredible marketing analytics team, that's working very closely with our finance team to
Mhm.
really understand every dollar we spend, like what's the return. And that's my responsibility as a leader in the organization. That if you give me money, that I'm going to go put it, that's going to go drive, not because I want to do cool stuff. I actually want to move the business forward. And that's a lot how we think through it.
For sure. Since you mentioned about like, you led a team across different functions such as like product, sales, analytics, and marketing. How does a cross-functional experience kind of like influence your leadership? So like how do you dedicate your time and also like, creating different benchmark for all these different pieces to like collaborate together?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's, I mean, because I've been in so many different roles, I think I lead with a different sense of empathy for those roles.
Mhm,
And there's the old adage of like, oh, there's always friction between marketing and product, or marketing and sales, and all of that. Well,
mhm,
I've been in both of those, and so unless you've been in their seat or in their shoes,
mhm,
you just need to, you don't realize, if I'm in sales, right, the number is very clear, scoreboard's there, it's really hard.
mhm,
Have some empathy for them as part of that. So I think where I spend a lot of my time with my leaders, shutting any of that noise down, try to shut that down, be like, listen, we're on the same team, we've got to go work together on a common goal.
mhm,
um, and I very much encourage the collaboration and the conversation. So what I really, really care about as a leader is, are we working together cross-functionally with our peers? Like the notion, when I first joined, there were a few conversations, and I remember very explicitly where my team was like, how important do you think the relationship with product and marketing is? Or how important do you think the relationship between sales and marketing is? And to me, it was like, well, what do you mean? Like, of course, those are like absolutely critical.
mhm.
But if you don't focus and cultivate and build that collaboration, then everyone in the organization feels that. And so I think high performing organizations are the ones that cross functionally can work together, can collaborate, can be critical of each other, right? Hey, you're missing that release as part of that. And they're like, yeah, I know. And they can say, hey, your campaign missed the mark as part of that, or sales, you didn't get as many people to this event, but that's okay. Like, let's go fix it together and figure out, we're all on the same team. So I think that's a lot of how I lead, is just really encourage the conversation, the collaboration. We're not in silos. And I
Mhm.
think too often, too many companies ship their org structure and their silos to their customers, and customers can feel that. And I think if we can do anything, just show up as one organization and ultimately, create that great customer experience that way.
For sure. I wonder, so like I wanted to maybe switch gear a little bit since like I feel like um a lot of our listeners are like founders or like people who are like investors. So you advise Krista, which is the co-founder when our show before, and then some other investor when our show before. And I'm sure like there's other startup that you have been like, like looking at or like helping or advising. So, when you're looking at like the startup land, how should they pick up like, the I guess customer service piece as well as like marketing piece from a company like Twilio or Box who are more established? Like, what are something that you feel like they should implement into their day-to-day like marketing and customer service?
Yeah, I mean, I think it goes back to, being incredibly customer centric.
Mhm,
And I think that's one of the guiding principles that ultimately any startup should think through, is like, ultimately, why are we doing this? We're not
mhm,
doing it for investors or our own personal. We're doing it to go solve a business problem, and customers ultimately as part of that. So I think, the guidance is, make sure that that is the core of how you're thinking through what you do and why you wake up every day. And I think as you get into the practical notion, and like one of the things, that I've talked to a lot of founders is like, who do I hire as a marketer? And I think sometimes you don't, like, maybe don't fully appreciate the craft of marketing, and
mhm,
it's changing a lot. And there are a lot of different archetypes of marketers. And so one of the things that we've often talked about, even at a large company, right? You're a bit more of a generalist and you're thinking through, but like, even, larger companies need different specific skill sets as the next phase of transformation as they're working through. And so the conversation I've had with a lot of founders where they're trying to figure out, okay, how should I think about marketing, is like, be very crisp on the problem that you're trying to solve, and how
mhm,
can that marketer help you solve that, right? If
mhm,
you have a product market fit and a messaging and all that, then you better go hire a product marketer to be your head of marketing, your CMO, or whatever that is, because that's their core competency and that's where they can go spike. If you're having a traction, like product market fits there, but like ultimately at the end of the day, like I'm not driving enough demand and I need more revenue and all that,
Mhm.
go get a demand marketer, right? That really good knows how to like get the tactics and figure out all the modern aspects as part of that. So I think being very explicit around the business that you're trying to solve, because you're never going to find a marketer that like is an expert across everything that we do. Same thing with CS leaders, right? Some CS leaders are going to be really good at like enterprise in front of customers, engaging, building programs around that. Others are going to be really good at the scale component of like, how do I put in, build communities, really scale, leverage technology to engage from a digital perspective. Those are very different profiles. What are you trying
Mhm.
to solve? And don't try to go get a scaled person that you've got an enterprise offering that you want them to go build, very specific offerings for an enterprise. That's very different skill set. So be very explicit around what you're trying to solve and hire that individual, and they'll grow into the other aspects, or they'll hire around them of like the people that are really good. Like if I'm like my core competency is like product marketing. All right. That is like the thing that I probably spike at the most. Am I a brand person? No, but I hire an incredible brand leader who can go do that. And I learn from him as we go. Demand gen, not my core competency. Hire great leaders to work through that. So I think that's the piece of like, be explicit around the business problem you're trying to solve, and then find someone that can help you work through that.
I wonder, how do you think about like training a core team? Or I guess like, how do you think about like building up your own core team for your marketing function? Like, do you pick like a younger person to train them into a role, or like you mentioned, like, maybe identify what you're lack of to like hire a person that can like basically be the like having their strengths to like fix like that problem. I wonder, when you are thinking about ensembling your own team, like how do you kind of um like put together your own core, I guess like the Twilio marketing squad?
Yeah, I think it each team is slightly different, right? And I think there's
Mhm,
some schools of thought where you're like, listen, I've worked with these individuals. I'm gonna,
mhm,
I know their strengths. I'm gonna move on, and they work together in company to company. I think
mhm,
that is a total like a strategy that can work for people. For me, it's a little bit more situational, right? And I try to
mhm,
balance out like there's a world. I very much subscribe to the philosophy of generalists and specialists, right? And the world
mhm,
needs both. I'm a generalist, right? I've not been doing like core marketing I've been very explicitly done different aspects of it because I'm a
mhm,
generalist and that's like where I excel. So I think a lot about how do I find balance of both? Because I think
mhm,
in a leadership team, different styles is part of that. I
mhm,
also have, like, I try to often think about there's some people that are really, really good, strong, operationally oriented. They execute, like, that is where they gravitate. They're really good as part of that. And then there's others that are big pie in the sky, strategic thinking, all that. That's more me. Like, I'm more like, hey, I've got to set the vision where we're going and all that. And I partner I've got a chief of staff who I'm like, hey, I need you to work with me to go execute on all of it. Doesn't mean that I can't run and do operational pieces of it, but it's not where I gravitate towards, where my strength is. So I
mhm,
think that's the piece as you think through how do you build teams,
mhm,
find a balance. Those that are execution oriented. If you have a team of all execution oriented as a CMO, that no one is going to get in a room and hash through and think through the future, then
mhm,
it's all on you to go build the future. But if you have some thought partners to say, hey, let's sit down and like hash through that, and then you've got team members that are like, I've got to go execute on that. That's great. That's a
mhm,
good balance. So I think a lot about that. And then the other thing that I really value, and you've sort of heard me talk about this, is this notion of continuous learning, because our craft, and I think just being in tech in general, is moving so fast that I really look for people that have like a curiosity to them, right? A mindset that they're just like, I I can't tell you exactly what needs to happen. I need people who are going to be there figuring it out, learning, testing, trying to ultimately solve the problem, because none of us have the answers. And it's changing so quickly. And so the people that come in, and that doesn't mean if they're early in their career versus, hey, they've been doing this for 30 years, but they keep evolving and adapting as part of that. I think it's more of a mindset, like openness to explore and change and learn versus an age thing of like, hey, they're relatively new in their career versus someone who's been here for a long time.
I wonder, so like one part that we briefly discussed about is like AI, since like I feel like as you mentioned, like, learning AI and like keeping up with AI is like very you need like a lot of like time and effort to like intentionally putting into it. So how do you think about like leveraging AI to improve efficiency in your own organizations? And if there's like any particular use case that you personally find it could be completely replaced by AI. I'm sure there's also a bunch of like co-pilots that are, you know, helping you do a campaign, or like I see so many like, AI avatars started like talking as a human. That's something I guess like how do you think about like as an organization leveraging AI to like do different tasks?
Yeah, I mean, I think it is going to change everything, regardless, right? And I think the hard part that we're all dealing with is how do we what gets disrupted? What's the path as part of that? My sense is like AI will disrupt everything that we know. I
Mhm.
just want to be on the end of like doing the disruption versus being fully disrupted. And I think
Mhm.
the people that don't embrace this, don't figure it out, are going to be disrupted by people that have figured out
Mhm.
how to disrupt with AI.
Mhm.
So we talk a lot about this, and my team's probably tired of hearing me talk through this, but I feel very, very passionately that you've got to go dig in and learn and play with it yourself, right? If you're not using these tools in your personal life to rethink how everything that you do to make your life much more efficient, then you're not going to apply that and not going to have that same natural curiosity for to do it in the workplace. So I
Mhm.
think the thing that we're looking at, and we've had some great success, like we literally have 90+% of our inbound opportunities coming in, and they're basically being engaged with AI and cultivating conversations and getting feedback and getting those individuals to the right place, whether that is right into the product or talking to a salesperson or through a support experience. Like we are really embracing like how do you drive a better engagement with AI. But as we start to think about marketing, and we're categorizing this into a lot of different capabilities. The first thing is like, oh, it's creative and it's content. Yeah, we get all of that. And I think we will continue to evolve that. And I think there's a notion where I think for a little bit of like maybe the last year, I've thought through this notion of, hey, we've had this specialization and we've got generalists. Reality is like AI makes specialization, like all the things that as a specialist, like AI can help solve that very quickly. So I can become a bit more of a generalist, right? And I
Mhm.
don't need to be a specialist across everything. So I think there's like some of that is true. But as I dig more and more, the reality is like you're going to actually need specialists to make sure the AI is like taking advantage, that it's correct, that it's accurate, and all of those things. So you're still going to need both within an organization. So what we're looking at is like, okay, how do we think through content? How do we think through all of our digital marketing, like all of our marketing campaigns? Imagine a world where we say, hey, I want a new campaign to go after this product in this geo. Help me understand what's the message, what customers should I target, what's the offer, what's the creative, what's the channel that I've got to go work through. Well, that's awesome. That's like nirvana. I think that's where we'd all love to get to. But it really matters like the data and the context around that data. Do I have all that information in a way that the AI can go leverage? Do I have the
Mhm.
channels to go reach that? Do I have the other tools built in, integrated in with our new marketing operation system to be able to answer those questions? And I think we're a ways away from getting to that point where you like put a single prompt and it creates every aspect of a campaign and launches it, and hey,
Mhm.
I can go to lunch now. I think that's the sort of future of where we'd love to get to. But
Mhm.
like this is I would describe it as a crawl, walk, run, right? How do we
Mhm.
get our data in order? How do we start to leverage the existing systems that we have? How do we put into in privacy and compliance and all of those things in a way that ultimately we're going to be incredibly efficient the way that
Mhm.
we engage with our customers? I think we're going to do the best work as marketers ever, but I think it's in conjunction with AI, not AI replacing marketing.
I wonder, so I guess like um as like the a big company CMO, like how do you think about like I guess like making using AI to improve each department's function, or do you, since you mentioned like crawl, walk, run, like I guess like what does a crawling phase kind of look like for a big organization?
Yeah, it's funny. Like we were chatting last night with my chief of staff and one of my key leaders, where we're prioritizing, because I think the thing that, it's a bit overwhelming of like, we could use AI to do 100 different things. Well, we need to start somewhere, and so we're working through typical two by two matrix of like, where's the big opportunity, what's the level of effort, where do we think we're going to have the most bang for the buck. So we've mapped that out across a bunch of use cases of like, here's where we think, can we do content repurposing? We take a piece of content and can we go apply that to 15 different aspects? Like take one piece and make it 15. That's
Mhm,
one big one. Localization. Like, how do I create an agent that basically says, I've created this in English. How do I localize it in 15 different,
mhm,
15 different languages to go push out as part of that? We're thinking through creative. We're thinking through pricing. So I think mapping out, okay, what are those use cases where we can go use AI? What's that level of effort? And then you take a step back and you go, okay, well, do we have the systems in place to go do that? Right? Do we have the models built out? Do we have all the right tooling? Do I have alignment with the rest of the organization? So we're building it almost like the crawl phase is identify, look and evaluate what you've got, and then start and iterate. Like one of
mhm,
the things that we've built into our sort of DNA is this test and learn, test and learn. Don't try to go and solve every use case. Go pick a few, learn from it. It's okay. We're going to fail. We're going to screw up. Like that's okay in the organization, but start to build like a methodical approach, right? To, hey, here's the 15 we're going to solve. Let's do these three first. And we have success around that. Let's get the next three and the next three. And then over time, right, we'll get to a spot where we're super excited about it.
I wonder, so like I guess like one of the things that you mentioned earlier that I thought were really interesting is like as a marketer, your core job is to spend $1 and then getting multiple dollar back, right? So like, but I think like also building a brand, since I feel like you guys lately like on your LinkedIn page it literally says like, builders, or like the really emphasizing on the builder experience. Like be a builder. So like I wonder like for the stuff that are like, harder to measure. So like for example, the brand awareness, or like, the mind share, or like any type of like soft metrics, like how do you kind of like think about that as a CMO? Or like, maybe the company stage is more towards like a revenue driving, or like, because it's a later stage company. So it's like um you probably don't need to focus as much as like at the very beginning, establish a brand or mind share to like the startup community. um I wonder, like, this is part of it, is like how do you measure the soft part of it? And then since like I feel like there's so many newer startup that are really focusing on, hiring 50 intern to like, making TikTok videos and stuff like that. So like I wonder, how do you think about that kind of distribution versus like a traditional sense of like a B2B SaaS company selling to other SaaS company kind of distribution?
I mean, I think there's no right answer to, as part of that. And I think there's always been this notion, especially in B2B, where like brand, it's a trade-off of brand versus demand, right? If I'm going to
Mhm,
spend $1, is it going to be into a campaign that's going to go drive pipeline or revenue or sales,
mhm,
versus I'm going to do something that's brand? And like, we don't know how we measure that. I think those work in conjunction. Like if you think about it, around brand and demand work together, the stronger my
mhm,
brand, then the better that, you're going to get more organic traffic coming in. You're going to have to spend less dollars around that. You're going to have higher conversion rates because everyone sort of knows you as the market leader from a brand perspective. So I think those two working in conjunction, it's not an either or. You kind of have to do both. Now the question is, how much of your budget do you spend on each? If I'm a startup, do I want to go spend all my money on brand and that you actually are driving no revenue? Probably not. But as you grow and get larger in an organization, brand matters, right? And
mhm,
there are metrics that you can start to think through. We think through this like brand health scorecard, right? What we do, obviously, we do surveys and we get feedback from customers that is more quantitative around the brand, and we're looking at, again, intent, inbound search traffic, organic, like all of those things are like proxies for if we're spending dollars, is it actually working? I think the other piece that, I'm progressively probably spending more time is thinking through the customers, right? And you mentioned this notion, like we just did I don't say we would say a rebrand, we did a refresh as
Mhm.
really thought about the brand. And we focused on this notion of builders, and Twilio has had this incredible brand focused on developers. Like that is
Mhm.
what we were known for. It was like developers. We got 10 million of them. Like that was our legacy and our heritage, which we still 100% are focused on. But I think when we took a step back, we said, well, why is it just developers? Why is it not builders? And we actually had this internal notion where we talked about Twilions being builders. It's like, well, why don't we bring that to the world? Because in this new world, especially with AI, everyone's going to be a builder, right? Imagine a world where you've got vibe coding, where I'm building applications for my family, right? With Replit or Level or whatever. Like
Mhm.
I'm a builder, right? Or I'm building a company, or I'm building a legacy and building something.
Mhm.
And the way that we're sort of measuring that, and the more and more I talk to customers and prospects, like I have, it's the qualitative stuff and the soundbite piece. But I was just at an event last week, and one of our events, and I had someone unsolicitedly come up to me and saying, "Oh my God, I love the new brand. Like this is awesome. It makes me feel like I'm part of the company." And you're like, "Wow, that's cool. Like I'm glad." You know what I mean? So it resonates, right? If you have customers that are literally, or prospects coming up to you saying, "I love what you're doing and the messaging, and it resonates with me." Can I measure that as like, did that create a dollar in? I don't know. But I can tell you that that person has stronger brand affinity. If they're going to buy something, they're probably going to buy from us versus one of our
Mhm.
competitors. Part of that. So again, I think it's a balance. All those soft metrics are harder, but I think that's one of the biggest things I've changed, probably in the last 5 years, is I've got a lot more sort of willingness to do more brand stuff than I was 5 years ago, because I kind of built a
Mhm.
world where, especially like a time in Adobe, where like measure everything, drive digital marketing. Like I was all part of that, which is 100% part of it. But I think there's a balance of like brand and demand more effectively. And I think B2B companies as a whole, like we're kind of boring, right? And I think that's the thing, is like we get serious, we're selling to other companies and enterprises, and we get fairly boring. Like that's the other thing, is like, how do we be bold? How do we break out? All the B2B companies do fun, innovative advertising and engagements with TikTok and everything else. And then we're like a boring enterprise company. So I'm trying to bring a little bit of more fun and life into the brand as well. And I think
Mhm.
that's important for the future.
I wonder, so like, how do you think about like scaling customer success? Because I feel like building that one-on-one connection when you have five customers is like not hard, but how do you think about like building that kind of connection at scale?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's becoming easier now, to be honest, than even a few
Mhm.
years ago with AI, because I think there's a world, like one of the things we were chatting about is like, how can we create a one-to-one
Mhm.
experience with every customer of ours, right? Could they have a concierge or a
Mhm.
partner, a digital partner, an AI partner, where you can go engage and get feedback,
Mhm.
right? Hey, I've got a question about a product around how to. I'm going to ask my digital concierge AI co-pilot as part of that. Um, so I think with technology, as you're thinking through, great, how do I have the data aligned? Do I have the way to communicate with those customers? And like AI starts to unlock them. And that's a lot of the problems we're solving with our own customers. Whereas like, hey, there's still a need for a call center, but like, why can't we deflect a lot of the basic questions and everything else? Why can't AI solve a lot of that? Whereas the more
Mhm.
complex, more human driven problems, well, I want to talk to an individual. And I think that's there is never a replace. I don't think there's ever going to be a replacement where you never want to talk to a human, but you
Mhm.
want to talk to a human to build a connection and have a relationship with that individual. But do you want to rely on that human to answer a question that basically an AI component could do really quick for you? Probably not. And so I think that's the balance of, especially in a lot of startups, I think there will be a world where you're going to drive a lot of the interactions. It's going to be digital, but don't
Mhm.
forget that people still buy from people, right? They may be agents may be buying from agents, but you still want some
Mhm.
connection, right? As to that company, that individual. Because what happens if something breaks, right?
Mhm.
That's naturally going to happen. And it like affects your business and you want to reach out to someone. Do you want to reach out to
Mhm.
an agent, or do you want to get a human on the phone saying, hey, I need help. This is affecting as part of that. So I still think there's a world of like digital and human,
Mhm,
connections are like the future. It's just like what that balance looks like. And digital allows you to scale, much, much faster.
mhm.
But I think don't forget the human component as part of it.
I wonder, so like when it comes to like when you're like dealing with a customer that maybe I think like how do you define like a bad customer? So like I mean maybe this is a really bad question, but like I guess like when I think some customer would actually pay you but like gave you like a really harsh feedback or like, telling you like how like I guess like this product is like not effective because of XYZ. Is that a bad customer versus like the customer that are like just like quietly quitting or like I guess like another part of the customer would be I think like when everything is going great, obviously we don't have the problem of like customer service or like, if everything's going great, it's like everybody self-serve. That's amazing, right? But like when like I guess like when shit hits a fan, like how do you think about dealing with or like the customer that are like asking a million question before spending like do you or like I guess like or like asking a million like add-ons or like oh this doesn't meet our xyz like like I guess like this just like didn't translate into revenue for us immediately yesterday, right? So how do you deal with those kind of like stuff
Yeah,
basically?
I don't think there's a bad customer, right? I think that's the
Mhm,
notion of like there's a bad customer. Yeah, there's bad humans that don't treat you well and like don't have respect and all that. But I think it's probably a bad product market fit
mhm,
where there's in I think there's worlds where you can agree upon like the solution we have isn't the right fit for you based on your use case, the stage you're in as part of that. Now you hope that there aren't too many
mhm,
of those examples, but there will be examples like your products are not always going to solve every problem across every customer use case, and that's totally fine. But be very clear around what you are trying to solve versus what you're not trying to
mhm,
solve. And I think too often, especially smaller like startups and others, like get enamored by like a big company, big brand, like I'm going to go create this new feature because this customer asked for it, but it's not actually really your core competency of where you're going and the product market fit of like where you're trying to the problem you're trying to solve, and that gets you in trouble because then now you've got a large customer that might be a big portion of your revenue, and then you have to maintain that. And it's like, well, do you want to go maintain that from a revenue perspective? But that's really hard, especially when you're struggling to have revenue and retention as part of that. So again, it goes back into let's be very clear of the business problem we're trying to solve. Is this part of the future around that? And if it's not, that may be painful, but it might be better to say, listen, we did this for you. It's actually probably not best. We're not going to continue to maintain that. We'll help you figure out a way to go solve that business problem for you. But ultimately, you might want to just be very transparent with that customer saying this isn't a problem we're going to solve. And you'd be better off doing it with someone else. You will build more trust that way versus trying to maintain something that doesn't work. It keeps breaking. And then ultimately they're going to leave anyway.
mm. I totally agree with you. I wonder, so like for the marketing, like different marketing function, at the very beginning, we chat about like there is product marketing, there's demand gen, there's brand people. Um, how many different functions are within the marketing department? And then how do you evaluate each person's benchmark? Because if everybody's like driving revenue, let's say $1 in, $3 out, like how should they like how should you like separate the KPI for everybody to like make sure that they understand like what do they need to do like this quarter to like hit the general quarter
Yeah, and I'll be
agenda.
clear, like not every component of my organization ladders up to like, are they driving revenue? Like that's
Right.
or there's a direct ability to go, measure the activity I did today drove revenue.
Right.
Right? I probably have 15 different functions, right, within the organization. And there maybe have a direct impact on revenue and maybe an indirect, aspect, but it should be tied to like, are we helping grow the business?
Mhm,
So we have an OKR process, right? Where I've got a set of OKRs that say, okay, here's what marketing is going to go deliver to the organization. And
mhm,
that cascades down. So each one of my leaders has a set of metrics. This is always an evolving, every company's, continue to work through what are the metrics that drive the specific behaviors. But, our guiding principle is, okay, is it measurable? right? Is the key result measurable, and is it actually tied to the core strategy of marketing that's tied into the core strategy of the company? So we have a cascading, right? It's like I've got my scorecard of like, if I say I'm going to go do X, I better go deliver on that. Each one of my leaders has their own, and then they push that down. Does it go all the way down to every individual in marketing? No. Could it? Yes. But there's like a point where, there's I've got teams of one or two, in a specific function. And so we don't always go all the way down to the individual contributor level.
Mm. What are, I guess, like for like scaling the Twilio marketing organizations, is there any like principle or like framework that guides you to like help you like build a world-class team? Or if
Yeah.
there's like any benchmark that you need to like for hiring?
Yeah. I mean, I think there's a couple things. I push my team on having a very high bar,
Mhm,
of like and having aspirations of being
mhm,
the best marketing team in tech, right? Or in the world.
mhm,
So we think a lot about that. My guiding principle, and when I first started, we really have a couple things. We want Twilio to be we want marketing to be a growth engine for the business. We want to be known, and people have an affiliation with our company and our brand, whether that's employees, customers, prospects, investors. Like, we have a responsibility to have some affiliation with Twilio as our brand. We need to make it easier to buy and sell, right?
mhm,
Our products, and we continue to work through that, and that's a never ending piece of it. But then I want to create a world-class organization within marketing where people want to work here, right? And we have fun, and we learn, and it's not just about, hey, execution and results. It's about creating an environment where people can be their best self. They can go drive and be really, really good at what they're doing. I see it as my job. I'm creating the next generation, right? My legacy is I'm creating the next generation of leaders, obviously marketing, but like, I want
mhm,
them to be leaders. I want them to ultimately be CMOs, to CEOs, as part of that, to start their own companies, to run large companies. Like, that's how I think through. Are we building the next generation of leaders, for tech?
mm. I wonder, so like in terms of like training the team members to be the next generation CMO or CEO, how do you kind of like putting that together like a either a training program or like the decision making as a CMO yourself today to like help them get there, but both like achieving the goals of the company? What
Yeah,
if there's like a conflict of, let's say, I really want to do this, but like the company actually need me to do Y, that kind of stuff.
it like, this is the inherent like challenge of like, how much
Mhm,
time do I have versus, can I go invest in myself as part of that? And we talk a lot about that, both at a leadership team, and as a marketing org. There is no shortage of content and access to like assets that you can find and go learn and get better, right? They never in history have we had so much access to content that we can go learn, right? And so it's not an access to content problem anymore. I think for a long time it was, right? 15, 20 years ago, it was like, oh, I got to go to this conference to learn, and I got to go travel to that, or I got to go to an MBA or something as part of that. Now it's like, you could find every piece of like content, whether it's good or bad, it's out there and available so you can learn. But then how do you curate that into different types of mediums? So like, some of the things that we do, I run what we call, lessons in leadership. I called it CMO show before. I bring in other CMOs and we talk about their career and mentoring and pathing, and it's like really cool. So my team's learning about other leaders and their path, and trying to figure out how they got to where they got to. We do book clubs, right? Not everyone participates, but I'm continuing. I led the first one,
mhm,
where it's like, hey, this is changing. Like, I want to learn. I want to go figure out. We talk a lot about it at a leadership team, both in marketing, but even Twilio leadership team. We have a marketing leadership panels. We've got one coming up where we're just talking through different leaders of like, how have you grown? Like, every marketer has got a different path. And, we want to inspire people to think through that. And then trying to figure out, how do we curate other content and give access to this, and give the time. I think that's the hardest part. And, if I can go make time for it and figure out how to spend an hour or 5 minutes a day to learn about AI, we have to encourage that with our teams too. And if we don't have enough time to go spend 5 minutes or 30 minutes, then we're probably not prioritizing all the stuff we need to do, because we all should be able to figure out how can we find 30 minutes in a day to go make ourselves better. And so that's a cultural thing that we're pushing on as well.
For sure. I wonder, so like since like I think you have a quite successful career and you have, I guess, like figured out your own career path from the scratch. So I guess like how do you think of yourself compared to a lot of the different peers who were starting off at like a similar place in your in careers that like kind of like you made it, but like a lot of people may not like achieve this level of success. Like what do you think differentiated you versus like a lot of different other people?
I mean, there's a lot of luck, right?
Mhm,
And component as part of that. Like if no one tells you that, yeah, there's hard work, but there's a luck component. I've been very lucky to be, in some cases, at the right place at the right time. But you have to be ready and prepared, and create a little bit of your own luck as well.
mhm,
Where I often talk about it is there's been a lot of things that I've been willing to do
mhm,
that have been painful, right? Learning experiences, digging
mhm,
in, trying on something, like taking on a role that you don't know much about, but you're given an opportunity. Well, you better be successful around it. Well, what does that take?
mhm,
It takes grit, determination, learning, and figure all of those things out. But I think it's, you sort of make your own luck to some degree, but you have to get a little lucky along the way. But I think if you build a reputation as someone that says they're going to do what they're going to do, you work hard, luck finds you in a lot of those cases. And
mhm,
I think that's maybe sort of the guiding principle. But be willing to like step out of your comfort zone,
mhm,
and do something that isn't natural. And I think this is one of the other things that I see a lot, where we talk about careers are not linear. I think a lot
mhm,
of people are like, well, I'm going to start in this role and then 2 years and then 2 years and 2 years, and then I'm going to be CMO. Well, I've had a lot of roles where I've gone lateral or back, like down, but I've gained a skill that I didn't have before that gave me an opportunity as like, the next role that came up as part of that. So I think that's the thing is don't be focused on title and like progression. Focus on the building blocks of, is this making you a better long-term leader in whatever function you have? Then those opportunities will come up as part of that. But just be really good, and do what you, if you're going to do something, you say you're going to do something, go do that. That's critically important.
I like what you said about like the skill that like better to make you like so like basically I guess like um figure out like what is a skill that like make you become better in like the long term. That's really crucial. Even like maybe you have to take like a step back to like do some stuff that were not like as glamorous as like a lot of like people think of like how career should be progressing. What are some skill that you feel like are critical to success?
Yeah, I think it's, and we've talked a lot about it. Be curious, naturally curious, and figure it out.
Mhm,
Right? Run towards the hard problems, because there's a lot of people that don't want to go solve the really, really difficult ones. And yeah, there are chances that you're going to fail, but I think you put the effort, you're going to learn. There's no like, it's not failure. It's like a learning
mhm,
experience of like, how do you take that and apply and do something different with it in the future? So I think getting outside the comfort zone, doing stuff that's maybe not as natural, run towards the hard problems, and just go focus and execute. I think that's ultimately, a great skill everyone can help them progress their career.
for sure. Well, Chris, so I want to end with like a quick 1 minute fire round for you. Uh, what's your favorite book?
Oh my gosh. That's like asking me which my favorite movie or favorite. I'm like looking in the background. What's my favorite day? Probably like one of the things is like the first 90 days I always use, because I've had different roles, and I
Mhm,
try to put, because I'm not as structured. I actually want to put a framework around how I want to make sure that I'm successful in the first 30, 60, 90 days. That's probably
mhm.
like one of the things. And then I've got 1,000 other books that are like less business oriented. But yeah, as you can tell, this is probably just a subset of the hundreds of books that I love to read.
Who made the biggest impact in your career?
Uh, Probably my wife, actually.
Mhm.
Giving me the guidance on a daily basis to ultimately do this crazy job that I have.
Who would invite to your dinner party?
Oh man. I just spent a lot of time in Italy on vacation, and so I'm a little bit in
Mhm.
the Michelangelo, Leonardo, Da Vinci world, because I was fascinated by the Renaissance, and I think like this new world, like we might be going hopefully through a new Renaissance. So maybe like how did they think through that? What were the challenges? What was the feedback? Can we apply that to a new AI world? Could be kind of interesting.
And where can we find you outside of work?
You will usually find me somewhere outside. I'm in Park City right now. So it's either skiing, hiking, biking, golfing, somewhere in nature doing something active.
Love that. Well, Chris, thank you so much for coming on the show today. It was such a wonderful conversation.
I appreciate it. All right, Grace, thanks. Great to chat with you.
Let me quickly